The year is 1349. A cold mist clings to the jagged coastline of the north, and the mountain passes are silent. The sun is a pale, distant memory, casting long, bruised shadows across the fjords. In this era of stone and wood, the world is vast and the villages are isolated, separated by miles of impenetrable forest and frozen rock. People live by the rhythm of the seasons, the crackle of the hearth, and the steady, ancient pulse of the tides. But in this particular autumn, the rhythm has broken. A new sound has entered the landscape. It is not the howl of a wolf or the crash of a storm. It is the soft, rhythmic scratching of a broom against the earth. Sh-sh. Welcome to the Midgard archives. Tonight, we journey back to the darkest chapter of the Scandinavian past, a time when the air itself seemed to turn heavy with an inescapable dread. We are traveling to the heart of the Great Death, to the era when the plague did not arrive as a germ or a sickness, but as a person. She was known as Pesta, the Black Death made flesh. As you listen, let the room around you fade into the shadows. Let your breathing slow to the pace of the winter wind. You are safe here, within the walls of the archives, but the story we tell tonight is one of a silence so deep it swallowed entire valleys. Imagine a remote farmstead, tucked high in a mountain glen. The family inside is preparing for the winter. They are stacking peat, drying fish, and mending wool. They believe they are safe because they are far from the ports and the crowded trading towns. But at the edge of the woods, where the light of the setting sun fails to reach, a figure appears. She is small and frail, her back bent by the weight of centuries. She is dressed in tattered black rags that do not flutter in the wind, but seem to absorb the light around them. Her face is hidden beneath a deep, dark hood, leaving only a glimpse of skin that looks like yellowed parchment stretched over bone. In her withered hands, she holds a wooden rake or a bundle of birch twigs tied into a broom. She does not knock on the door. She does not call out. She simply begins her walk through the village. In the folklore of the north, the appearance of Pesta was the ultimate omen. If she carried her rake, there was a glimmer of hope for the household. A rake has wide teeth, and as she passed over a village, some souls would slip through the gaps. A few would suffer the fever and the swellings, but would wake to see the next spring. But if she was seen carrying her broom, all hope was extinguished. A broom sweeps clean. Where Pesta swept, not a single soul would remain. The fire in the hearth would go out. The livestock would low in the barn until they starved. The doors would swing open on their hinges, and the moss would begin its slow, green march across the floorboards. The terror of Pesta was her absolute silence. She was the personification of an inevitable end. She did not represent the violence of war or the suddenness of an accident. She represented the slow, cold encroaching of the dark. To the medieval mind, the plague was not a biological event. It was a guest that had been sent to visit. And Pesta was a traveler who never stayed in one place for long. She walked the mountain paths that no horse could navigate. She crossed the glaciers where the ice was blue and treacherous. She followed the silver veins of the rivers, moving always toward the next cluster of smoke rising from a chimney. There is a story, whispered for generations in the valleys of Norway, about a ferryman who worked the cold, deep waters of a northern fjord. The day was ending, and a thick, grey fog had settled over the water, turning the world into a realm of ghosts. The ferryman was preparing to tie up his boat for the night when he saw a figure standing on the pier. It was a woman in black, so thin she seemed almost transparent in the mist. She carried a small leather book and a broom. She asked to be carried across to the other side. The ferryman, though tired and unnerved by her presence, agreed. He was a man who took pride in his work, and he would not leave a traveler stranded in the cold. As he rowed, the only sound was the rhythmic creak of the oars in the locks and the soft lap of the water against the hull. The air in the middle of the fjord grew unnaturally cold, freezing the spray on his beard. He looked at his passenger. She sat perfectly still in the stern, her hood casting a shadow that seemed darker than the night itself. Curiosity overcame his fear, and he asked her where she was traveling. She did not look up, but her voice drifted to him like the sound of dry leaves skittering over stone. She told him she was going to the Great Valley. She told him she had much work to do before the first snow. The ferryman realized then who sat in his boat. His hands trembled on the oars. He thought of his wife and his children waiting for him in their small cabin. He thought of the village where he had lived his entire life. He fell to his knees in the bottom of the boat, the cold water seeping into his clothes. He begged her for mercy. He pleaded for the lives of those he loved. Pesta slowly opened her leather book. She turned the pages with skeletal fingers, searching for a name. She looked at the ferryman and spoke with a chilling finality. She told him that his name was written there, and what is written in the book of the Great Death cannot be erased. The ferryman wept, but Pesta leaned forward, and for a moment a sliver of light caught her eye, a gaze as ancient and cold as the stars. She told him that because he had been a faithful ferryman, because he had carried her across the water without hesitation, she would grant him a single favor. She would make his passing easy. She promised him that he would not suffer the agony of the fever or the terror of the breathlessness. He would simply sleep. When the boat touched the far shore, Pesta stepped out and vanished into the fog. The ferryman returned home, lay down in his bed, and fell into a slumber so deep he never woke to see the tragedy that befell his valley. He died in peace, the only mercy Pesta ever offered. This was the nature of the shadow that fell over Midgard in the 14th century. In the span of just 2 years, the population of the north was cut in half. Entire regions were emptied of human life. There are valleys today where you can still see the stone foundations of farms that have been empty for 600 years. These are the places where Pesta carried her broom. In those years the silence was absolute. The bells in the stave churches stopped ringing because there was no one left to pull the ropes. The fields of grain turned brown and bent under their own weight, unharvested. The forests, always eager to reclaim their territory, began to grow over the roads and the fences. One of the most haunting legends of this time is the story of the Valley of Jastadal. It is a place guarded by high mountains and a massive glacier, a sanctuary that the people believed was unreachable by the outside world. But Pesta can walk where no man can. She came to Jastadal and she swept the valley clean. Every house, every barn, every living thing was taken. Years later, when hunters finally ventured back into the valley, they found only one living soul. A young girl, wild and silent, living in the ruins of a farmhouse. She had survived the winter and the loneliness, a solitary spark of life in a graveyard of stone. They called her the Jastila Ripper, the ptarmigan of the valley. She was a living reminder of the era when the world ended and began again. As you listen to the steady rhythm of this story, consider the darkness of those medieval winters. There were no electric lights to push back the gloom. There was only the fire, and when the wood ran low, there was only the cold. In the long nights, the stories of Pesta were more than just tallies. They were a way to process the impossible. How do you explain the disappearance of everyone you have ever known? You give the tragedy a face. You'll give it a black hood and a broom. You make it a traveler, a guest who comes and goes. By naming the fear, our ancestors found a way to live with it. They understood that life is a fragile flame, easily snuffed out by the wind, but they also understood the importance of the hearth and the community while the flame still burns. There are other versions of Pesta in the old scrolls. Sometimes she was said to wear a red dress when the sickness was mild, a warning of blood and fever that might be survived. But the black dress was the final word. Some said she traveled with a large black book, and if she stayed at your farm, she would sit by the window and read the names of those who were next. Others claimed that you could hear her coming long before you saw her. They described the sound of a dry, rasping breath or the smell of old, stagnant water. But always the stories return to the rake and the broom. They are the tools of the harvest, and Pesta is the harvester of souls. As the 14th century drew to a close, the figure of the old woman in black began to fade from the mountain pass. The plague retreated, leaving behind a transformed world. The social order had collapsed. The power of the old kings had withered, but the land remained. The mountains of Midgard stood as they always had, indifferent to the coming and going of men. The stave churches, though empty for a time, were eventually filled again. The bells found new hands to ring them. The north is a place of resilience, a land that knows how to endure the long winter because it knows that the spring, however distant, is inevitable. But the memory of Pesta is etched into the very stones of the valleys. She represents the memento mori of the north, the reminder that we are all travelers on a foggy fjord, and we do not always know who our passengers are. She is the shadow in the corner of the eye, the chill that runs down the spine when the wind changes direction. In the folklore, she is the ultimate teacher of humility. She reminds us that no wall is thick enough to keep out the change of the seasons, and no valley is so remote that it is hidden from the eyes of fate. Tonight, as you drift toward the edge of sleep, imagine the silent traveler moving away from you. She's walking back into the mist of history, her black rags disappearing into the deep indigo of the Arctic night. Her broom is silent, her rake is still. The work she had to do is finished, and the archives are safe. The heavy, rhythmic scratching sound is gone, replaced by the soft, comforting silence of your own room. The shadows are just shadows. The wind is just wind. Think of the ferryman's boat, now empty and drifting on a calm, moonlit sea. The water is still, the air is clear. The dread of the Middle Ages has been tucked away into the high shelves of the archives. A story preserved in ink and memory, but no longer a threat to the living. You are anchored in the present. You are protected by the light of the modern world and the warmth of your own rest. The Great Death is a legend, a dark fairy tale told to pass the time until the dawn. Let your mind wander through the empty stave churches of the past. See the moonlight filtering through the high, narrow windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. There is a profound peace in those old places, a sense of time standing still. The fear has left them long ago, leaving behind only the quiet dignity of the wood and the stone. You are like those ancient buildings, strong, silent, and at peace. The storms of history have passed over you, and you remain. As you sink deeper into your mattress, feel the weight of your body becoming a part of the stillness. Your breath is steady and slow, a contrast to the ragged gasps of the stories. You are breathing the clean, cool air of a safe world. The Natmara and the Pesta are characters in a book that is being closed. The words are fading. The images are blurring into a soft grey haze. In the north, they say that the stars are the eyes of the ancestors watching over the dreamers. They have seen the coming and going of the plague, the rise and fall of empires, and the steady turning of the great wheel of the sky. They are constant. They are calm. Let their light guide you into a dreamless, restorative sleep. The Midgard archives are settling into the dark. The lanterns are being extinguished one by one. The silence that remains is not the silence of Pesta, but the silence of a deep and well-earned rest. The mountain passes are clear. The fjords are at rest. The silent traveler has reached the end of her path and has sat down to rest beneath the roots of the world tree. She is no longer walking. She is no longer sweeping. The north is at peace. You are at peace. The long night is your protector. The darkness is your sanctuary. Let the last of the thoughts drift away like dry leaves on a cold stream. They are moving away from you, floating into the distance where you no longer need to follow them. The story has reached its end. The archives are locked. The keys are placed in a secret drawer. There is nothing left to do but exist in this moment of absolute quiet. The world is a vast, dark, and beautiful place, and you are a part of its silent, enduring mystery. Sleep now in the shadow of the mountains. Sleep in the memory of the stone. Sleep while the stars keep their long, ancient watch over the land of the north. The silent traveler is gone. The broom is still. The night is yours. Sleep, sleep, sleep.